hum of drones was constant, a mechanical lullaby that the people of Sector 13 had long since learned to ignore. Overhead, the sky was a sickly shade of gray, streaked with the grime of the Syndicate's towering industrial complexes and the neglected fallout from the final war. Valentina Rivera stared out the narrow window of her family's apartment, her fingers tracing the cracks in the glass as her mind wandered. On the streets below, faceless figures shuffled through the alleys, heads bowed under the weight of oppression. The neon signs of Syndicate propaganda blinked their endless promises of order and peace, but no one believed those anymore. The city was broken, its spirit crushed beneath the iron fist of the Syndicate that had ruled for decades since the final war. It wasn't just fear that kept people in line, it was exhaustion. The kind that gnawed at your soul until you forgot what it was you were fighting for in the first place. The Syndicate's message was simple: order above all. And they maintained that order with brutal efficiency. Valentina pulled away from the window, her hand instinctively reaching for the leather cord around her neck, where a small metal disc, a relic from before the war, hung. It was the only thing she had left of her father's past, his life as a soldier before he laid down his rifle and surrendered to the Syndicate's new world. They didn't speak much about those days, but Valentina knew the pain in her father's eyes when he watched the news streams showing the Syndicate's forces cleansing another neighborhood or eradicating the last vestiges of rebellion in some distant sector. The apartment was cramped, the walls peeling with damp rot, a flickering light from a single bulb above a broken table. Her mother sat, stitching a torn jacket, work she did for neighbors to scrape together enough to survive. They had ration cards, but the food was barely enough to sustain the family. Valentina's father sat in his chair by the door, listening to the static-laden voice of the Syndicate's news broadcast. "Another raid in Sector 9 today," her father said, his voice rough from years of breathing in the polluted city air. "Is anyone fighting back?" Valentina asked, though she already knew the answer. "Not anymore," he muttered, shaking his head. "The revolutionaries are getting pushed further underground. It's only a matter of time before the Syndicate crushes them completely." Her mother sighed softly, not looking up from her stitching. "Don't get any ideas. You're too old to fight," she said. The spark of rebellion had long since dimmed in her eyes, buried beneath years of watching friends disappear in the night, hauled away by Syndicate enforcers and never seen again. Valentina clenched her fists, frustration boiling beneath her skin. The world was suffocating her. She couldn't stand how her parents seemed to accept it. They had trained her every day as a child to fight back, how to use a weapon, how to fight, how to utilize the Syndicate's technology against them. Training that she took with her and built upon in her adult life. Why didn't they want to fight now? But what could they do? What could any of them do? Every neighborhood was patrolled by drones, every conversation monitored by the Syndicate's endless network of surveillance. Even her dreams felt like they were being watched and streamed directly into. "Maybe one day," her father continued, "things will change. But not for us. Not in this lifetime." Valentina stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the worn wooden floor. "I'm going out." "Be careful," her mother warned, her eyes flicking toward the window where a drone hovered briefly, its sensors scanning the streets below. "Yeah," Valentina muttered, pulling on her worn jacket and stepping outside into the bitter cold. The streets smelled of decay, the rot of a dying city. Trash lined the gutters, and the occasional flash of neon reflected off the puddles left by a recent rain. She made her way down the alley, past crumbling buildings and the occasional huddled figure. The people of Sector 13 were shadows of what they once were, broken by the weight of the world around them. Order above all. Valentina crossed the street toward the market, a makeshift collection of stalls where merchants sold goods beneath the watchful eyes of Syndicate patrols. Enforcers in black armor, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors, stood at every corner, rifles slung over their shoulders. They were a constant reminder that rebellion was futile, that any spark of resistance would be snuffed out before it could ignite. She had just turned the corner when the sound of heavy boots echoed behind her. Valentina froze, her breath catching in her throat. The enforcers were closing in. At first, it seemed like another routine patrol, but their pace quickened, their movements more deliberate. Valentina's heart pounded in her chest. Something was wrong. She heard the scream before she saw the enforcers break into a run. Her blood ran cold. The direction they were heading was her building. Valentina's legs carried her faster than she thought possible, racing back toward her home. She rounded the corner just in time to see black armored enforcers kicking down the door to her apartment. Her father, struggling in their grip as they dragged him to the ground. Her mother, clutching the torn jacket she'd been sewing, screamed for them to stop, her voice hoarse as she sprinted forward, completely ignored. Still half a street away, Valentina was too late. The lead enforcer, a towering figure with a scarred visor, raised his rifle and fired. Her mother's scream was silenced. Valentina's world shattered. She stumbled, her legs giving out beneath her as she watched the blood pool beneath her mother's crumpled body. Her father struggled against the enforcers, shouting incoherently, but a swift blow to the head silenced him too. He hit the ground hard, unmoving. Blood trickled from his gaping wound. All the while, an authoritative figure oversaw the enforcers, dictating their every move. Valentina's cry tore from her throat as she lurched forward, but the enforcers paid her no attention. They methodically searched the apartment, turning over furniture, rifling through drawers, as if searching for evidence. Evidence of a rebellion. Valentina's chest heaved with silent sobs, her body paralyzed with shock. The world around her became a blur of sound and light, the hum of the drones, the cold gleam of the enforcers' visors, the flicker of neon propaganda in the background. This was the Syndicate's order. This was their peace. One of the enforcers spotted her, their visor tilted in her direction. Valentina's breath caught as their finger hovered near the trigger of the rifle. He squeezes, firing screaming bursts of energy at Valentina, who quickly jumped into action and dodged the onslaught. The enforcers closed in on her position, but she was able to quickly escape. She could become faceless, blend in with her surroundings. She was just a shadow, like everyone else in Sector 13, beneath notice. After a while, the enforcers left, their heavy footsteps fading into the distance. Valentina crawled from the shadows, her trembling hands reaching for her mother's cold body. The numbness set in, washing over her as she knelt beside her parents, their lifeless forms a grotesque testament to the Syndicate's unyielding cruelty. Her world was spinning, collapsing around her. She didn't know how long she stayed there, gripping her mother's jacket, staring blankly at the blood-stained floor. The streets outside continued as usual, people keeping their heads down, pretending not to see. But something inside Valentina had changed. Her grief solidified into something colder, angrier. This was the Syndicate's world, and in their world, people like her didn't matter. But that would change. Her parents may have accepted their fate, but Valentina wouldn't. Not anymore. Her resolve was strong as she stood before her parents' burning bodies, sending them on their final journey. With a final glance at her broken home, Valentina stood, her body trembling, but her mind clearer than it had ever been. The revolutionaries were still out there, somewhere in the shadows, waiting, fighting. They would have her now, and she would make the Syndicate pay.